Hello, everyone. Hello. I wanted to say thank you all for being here this afternoon. I want to say thank you to the Lincoln Club Board of Directors for having me as well. So today I'll be talking to you primarily about my leadership experience as it relates to conservatism on college campuses, as well as, if time permits at the end, kind of a general analysis for why I believe we are in the political climate that we're in. So my speech will begin pretty much to be starting off at UCLA. As Art had said in the introduction, I went to Copper Mountain College where I studied economics. I went to UCLA where I studied political science, and I also attended Oxford University. But a lot of my political activism began when I went to UCLA. And it began primarily because I knew I wanted to get involved in activism, and I knew the specific club that I wanted to find, and that was the Bruin Republicans. Bruin Republicans was one of a couple organizations that I got involved with, and the Bruin Republicans I got involved with pretty much immediately. At the time, the reason was twofold. Was when I was going to UCLA, I knew that I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anyone from our area that were current students at the time. There's a couple now that are there as well. And so I wanted to use it as an outlet for finding like-minded friends and individuals, but I also wanted to use it as a form of activism. And I guess kind of provide a brief summary of my first year. I joined the organization, but I also signed on as a volunteer. I joined the outreach team as an outreach coordinator. So some of my job was in many ways being the face of the organization. I was going to be the one that was out in the field handing out materials, whether it be flyers or schedules of events, or giving out posters for students to put up in their room. And then if I was lucky enough, maybe get some emails to sign them up for our weekly emails. And then, so that was kind of the primary part of my job. And the year was a pretty great year for the first year. We had a whole plethora of events. We had some major speakers. We had Dinesh D'Souza, who is a prominent Republican filmmaker. He's made films such as Hillary's America. We had Dennis Prager, who is the founder of Prager University. We had the California Rifle and Pistol Association come to our general membership. We had Heather McDonald, who wrote The War on Cops, and a plethora of other speakers that I'm probably doing wrong by not mentioning their name, but for the sake of time. It was a great year, but what also made this year interesting was this was kind of the first time that I started to see ideological splits within both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And this kind of aspect will also tie in with what I'm going to talk about at the end of the speech. But this was the first time that I started to see that the Republican Party had not only social conservatives who came from religious backgrounds, who were concerned about the way the country was going in regards to social issues, but it was also the first time I noticed that there was also libertarian conservatives who were more focused on limiting government, limiting spending, and increasing individual liberties. At that same token, I also started to notice the rise of Trump-like Republicans who were more focused on tougher immigration policy and protecting the U.S. economy. And within this first year, it was also particularly interesting because this was Donald Trump's election year. And post-election, seemingly the politics of every day became the politics of every minute. It didn't matter if you were in an Italian class trying to learn how to speak Italian. The professor, the TA, or the campus environment, the students would find a way to make derogatory or negative comments about President Trump or about Republicans in general, which was really fostering an environment that was not open to discussion. The post-election, professors were apologizing for hosting classes, and students were marching throughout campus for weeks, and I'm talking in the thousands, expressing their discontent with the election of the president. One of my professors actually hosted class that next day, and she was a data analytics professor, so the main subject matter that she was teaching us had to do with data analytics and computer coding and programming. And she gave about a 15-minute monologue post-election describing how she was sorry for having class that day, and it should have been a mental health day for students. And and she just apologized for about 15 minutes, but she said because of the rigorous coursework we had to go through with it. And what this really taught me was fundamentally both the students and the professors had a fundamental disregard for the strength in our nation's institutions. Sure, they didn't agree with the president or his policies or whatever the outcome might be, but to them, because they didn't have the belief in the strength of our nation's institutions, to them, one individual solely could change the path of the country or strip individual people's rights and liberties. To them, it was a national disaster. At the end of this year, I was elected as the vice president of the Bruin Republicans. And I wanted to make sure that we really hit the ground running when it came to our events and our activism. And we started working on this almost immediately. We were elected in, I believe, late April to May of the school year, and then we started planning just about at that time. We created our schedule of events. We had headliners like Charlie Kirk, who's involved with Turning Point USA. We had Candace Owens. We had Ben Shapiro, and a whole plethora of other speakers, local representatives, people running for office. We would go on gun range trips, and we had it all set in stone. And in fact, our first couple set of events, and actually throughout the entire year, were largely successful. Our club membership the year prior was about 15 people on average. We had grew to 70. And our rooms that we had booked for the year were for a capacity of 50. So we were standing room only for a majority of our events, which was great because I was able to incorporate a lot of the things that I had learned from doing outreach and being involved in the field. I was able to incorporate that within my leadership in order to increase our club size and our impact on campus. However, while things are going well, we did have a lot of issues when it came to both the campus environment from students and from administrative faculty. One of the people that we wanted to make sure we brought to campus that we set as an initiative from the beginning was Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro, I'm not sure how many people are aware of him, but he is very popular among my demographic, and we knew it would energize students to get involved with the club and to stay involved throughout the year. But it was going to come at a heavy cost. We had to raise $30,000. And if you are a college campus organization where you change over membership and leadership every year, it's kind of hard to get that level of investment into a student organization. So that was one of our main, that we thought that was going to be one of our main things to tackle, but it actually didn't end up being that way. We raised the money just fine. And it started working with the administrative faculty at UCLA as early as June. Mind you, school is not in session until September. So while I was studying abroad in Oxford, I was sending emails back and forth with administrative officials making sure that we were good to go for the Ben Shapiro event. And this was coming at a time in which Ben Shapiro was very popular. This was coming just off of the Berkeley incident, where there was millions of dollars in damages and security, and the campus was on fire because Ben Shapiro was coming to speak on campus. So even though we had been working with the university as early as June, the event was going to be in November. Come mid-October, the university starts proposing to us some policies that had never been made apparent before. Yeah, and as it become the no from our sole advisor, who is our campus's direct advisor for our organization, he stated that this specific policy, which we call the 70-30 policy, had only been used 5 times in the university's history, mind you, which just had its centennial celebration, so in 100 years it's only been used 5 times. He stated 4 of which were on the Bruin Republicans. So what this policy stated in specific was, for one, we had to guarantee that 70% of the public, or 70% of the attendees were going to be students, and no more than 30% could be members of the public. In conjunction with this, we could not go forward with the event unless we signed the agreement, and under the agreement, if we signed it, we were going to be responsible for all security costs for the event if the ratio of student to public did not come out to be 70-30. The reason why this is a major problem is, for one, they could not estimate security costs until after the event had occurred, which, mind you might be like, okay kid, like, how much can security be? Berkeley spent over $1 million in just security for the Ben Shapiro event, which had just happened a couple months prior. In conjunction with this, there was no way, and they knew this, there was no way we could realistically guarantee the ratio of students to non-students. Because we were a campus organization, we wanted to make sure as many students had the capabilities of getting in and seeing the event as possible, so we made it free. The issue there is, let's say we could figure out logistically a way to where only 70% of registries had to be students and 30% were public. But if there's no cost to attend an event, there's no sunken cost by not going. So on a given day, the registration might be 70-30, but if a select group of students don't show up because they have finals, they have tests, being a student's hard, then they might not show up and now our ratio's off. And it wasn't that the organization would be financially responsible, it would be that me and 2 other signatories would be personally financially responsible. Mind you, this policy had never been brought up until we were about 3 or so weeks away from the event actually occurring, even though we'd been planning it with the officials as early as June. So we clearly identified this as a problem, as something that was not going to be solved. Almost immediately as we noticed that this was going to be a bigger issue, we started documenting as many things as we could. We were having meetings with administrative officials pretty much weekly, and we started documenting everything that they were saying. We were typing it up as if it was meeting minutes. We would send it to the officials and get them to say that yes, all this information is correct as stated, and we were getting prepared because we knew it was going to be a battle. So given that the event was only 3 weeks away at this point, we had figured the only way we were going to be able to realistically win this event, which by the way has so much sunken cost. We've raised about $30,000. We've been planning this for months. This is something we really wanted to happen, and our student base was really excited for, especially our general members. We figured that the only way we were going to be able to win this wouldn't be through actual litigation. If we were to actually go to court and sue the university for the discriminatory practices, it would take months. And by that point, it would be pretty much useless, as the event would have already passed, and who knows, I might even be graduated by the time that it's all figured out. So, the way we went about it was we issued a demand letter. We drafted a policy and issued a demand letter to the chancellor of the university, as well as many media outlets as we possibly could. We had been working with lawyers who are working pro bono, who work specifically in helping conservative causes, and we were ready. So we sent it out to as many media organizations as we could. Within a week, we had articles in the LA Times, Washington Post, Fox News, MSNBC. We were applying the pressure as much as we possibly could. Now, given at the time, as I was saying, we were meeting about after one of our last meetings when we kind of figured that this was the road we were going to have to go down. So when it came time for our next meeting, to say the least, it was pretty awkward. At the time, our Facebook post for the event had reached hundreds of thousands of people, and I don't even know how to project how many people had actually seen the event through all the various articles that we were in. So when it came time for us to have our next meeting, it was just me and at the time the president, my really close friend Jordan, were going to go to a meeting. And we met with university officials, and I kid you not, it was the longest meeting table I have ever seen in my life, in a room on part of campus I've never been at before, that I had to leave class early to attend. And this table was the longest table I've ever seen before. We walk in, and there are about 10 to 12 university officials all standing on one side, all sitting on the other. And then just me and my friend who just left class early to sit on the other side. Needless to say, I was nervous. I mean, I'm still a student. I'm still going to school there. I mean, if my name is known, it's known. I have professors who are teaching me, and the administrative faculty there definitely know me, especially at this point. So there were a lot of costs associated with this, and we were definitely nervous. So when we get into the meeting, the vice chancellor of the university is there, as well as many other officials, some I've seen before, some I've never seen before. And the vice chancellor of the university started by saying, I understand there's someone you guys want to get on the phone. And we said yes, because we had let them know we wanted our lawyer on the phone. So we put our lawyer, Tyson, on the phone. We put him on speaker, and he says hello. And then the vice chancellor of the university pulls out his phone and puts on speaker lawyers representing the University of California, Los Angeles, who introduced themselves from being located in San Francisco. So definitely very nervous. And then a couple minutes into the discussions, the vice chancellor stated that the Bruin Republicans would not have to sign the 70-30 agreement. We would not have to pay for any security fees for the event, and that the campus was going to revisit its policies. Now, this ended up being a major victory. I mean, we permanently changed campus policies, and we won our battle. We knew the only way we were going to be able to make the university do good on their word was going to be if there was media pressure. They were already doing something that in our eyes and in many members of the student body's eyes was unethical. And it was a victory. I mean, we sold 900 tickets for the event in 8 minutes. Yes. I'll tell you what, when we went live, the email was just going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just emails just coming in of registrations. And that we sold those 900 tickets in 8 minutes without ever announcing when the actual registration would be. So that was just at any given day at like 10:15, 900 tickets were gone before we could even know what to do with it. And so it was a major victory because the event was a wild success. It was heavily attended. We got to see one of our favorite speakers, and we also got to permanently change campus policies, which I'm still getting emails about to this day about how the policies have changed and revisions coming forward. Now, I gave you basically a visualization of what it's like if you're a leader in a campus, college campus organization, if you're conservative, from the administrative and faculty perspective, but I haven't really given you so much when it comes from the student body or working with professors. When it comes to, at the risk of sounding cliche, if I were to describe the university dynamic in 2 words, it would be intolerant and a bubble. And I'll give kind of an anecdotal example as to why that is. When I was in a political elections campaign strategy course, and there was roughly about 80 or so students in the class, and they did an anonymous survey of a political affiliation. So there's no risk of being outed as a Republican if you're in this class. It's totally anonymous, and the results are going to be shown real time on the screen. And this was not my last year at UCLA, but one of the 2 prior. And through the results, 15% of the class identified as Republican, with the rest identifying as Democrat. And needless to say that it was at that time, the Bruin Republican president and myself were in the class. So if you're in a class of 80, there might be 1 other Republican in there. So if that gives you kind of an understanding of the political identities as it relates to the student body. Now, what's important though is that this doesn't just come from the student body, it's a professor-curated culture. And whether it's coming from generic smears or offhand comments, or if they're total courses that are designed to counter, students are provided a one-sided education. And I think one thing that really hit home with me was when I was studying abroad at Oxford in the UK, one of my professors said he saw a fundamental change in our nation when there was a curriculum change. He stated we used to study Anglo-American history and American law and founding philosophies, but a lot of those courses have been scrapped and been replaced with things like gender studies, ethnic studies, and courses that do not define those same values. And I totally agree, and I think it comes down to one of the founding principles that I have, which is nuance is lost when it's not taught. It's very easy to just disregard our nation's founding documents as dated or as ignorant because of our nation's history if you don't actually read the documents themselves and see the genius that is intertwined within them. Every time I read any of the founding documents from the founding fathers, it just amazes me at the amount of political history that they had and how the extent they worked to make sure that there was checks and balances both within the federal government, amongst itself, and between the states, and all encompassed. But that's easy to lose all that and write it off as irrelevant or dated if you're not actually taught the material. And so, kind of with wrapping that up, I want to talk a little bit about why I believe we are in the political climate that we're in. And when I say the political climate that we're in, I'm referring strictly to how it seems like if you are in political parties that are juxtaposed to one another, seemingly no one is able to have a conversation with each other. So I kind of have a theory for why this is, and I call it political regimes. Now when I say political regimes, I don't mean in the extent of like a dictator. I don't mean like Bashar al-Assad in Syria or Kim Jong-un in North Korea. By political regimes, I mean the established political norms of the times. So to kind of explain this concept, I'll create a juxtaposition. You have the New Deal regime under FDR, and you have the Reagan regime under Ronald Reagan. These 2 regimes fundamentally different from one another. Under the New Deal regime, you have big government policies. You have big government spending. You have the introduction of Social Security and all other forms of social programs. It was the era of big spending. Now, in total opposition to that, you have the Reagan regime, which is focused on free markets, limited government, limited spending, and increase in individual liberties. Now, within each regime, each political regime, you have leaders who are for the regime and leaders who are against the regime. If there is a leader who is working against the regime, but the regime is strong, they will have a political affiliation that is more closely related to the regime itself. And an excellent example of that will be like Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton at the time was working within the Reagan regime when the Reagan regime was very strong. And then in many ways today, Bill Clinton's policies you would never see introduced by a Democrat today. I mean, he had tougher policies on criminal justice reform. He was for harsher sentences. He was for the Defense of Marriage Act. He was even quoted in his State of the Union address and other major speeches as saying, the era of big government is over, and the government cannot solve all your problems. I cannot see a Democrat today saying those same statements. So that plays a testament to the fact that he was operating within the Reagan regime, which was really strong at the time. He was working within a political norm that had strength. Now, if you were to continue down the Reagan regime, I believe some of the things that occurred within the Bush administration, whether or not it was his fault or not, hurt a lot of the images of the Reagan regime. Some of which would be like with Hurricane Katrina. A lot of the members of the general public saw Hurricane Katrina and felt as if the response from FEMA was lackluster. And now what that portrays, at least in a general sense, is, hey, maybe there is a place for the federal government to help when it comes to certain instances, like maybe natural disasters. So the Reagan regime's kind of ideology of limited government in scope was kind of hurt by that a little bit when it came to federal government having a place in everyday society. In conjunction with that, a strong presence of the Reagan regime is having a strong military and being very patriotic. But coming off of the Iraq War, a lot of people have had negative perceptions of the Iraq War. So that is another instance where that has kind of hurt some of the imagery of the Reagan regime. And in conjunction that, also a lot of money was spent. A lot of times we talk about the deficit and the debt, which me being very fiscally orientated kills me. But we talk about it all the time, but we spent trillions of dollars. So I believe a lot of the things that happened within the Bush regime, within the Bush administration, whether his fault or not, may have hurt the Reagan regime. And then coming off the cusp of the Bush administration, you have Obama who comes in and then starts putting forth a much more progressive policies. I mean, one of which, if there was ever overarching policy, is Obamacare. And so he kind of came in as an oppositional trailblazer. Obama was not working within the framework of, hey, we're all like Reagan. He was coming to the framework of, this is a regime that is hurt, and I can start anew and change the course of the country. And so it's because of that I think is the reason why there is so much heated political climate. Because our representatives and our general public don't know the framework to work within. There is no established regime that is strong, that everyone knows, oh, okay, we're going to work within this framework because this is what the country is and this is the path the country is going. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, and because of that uncertainty, both sides are running to the other ends. And then so that is kind of the reason why I believe we're in the political climate that we're in. And I've seen some of that even just on a more tight-knit level at the university with some of my experiences when it comes to just having general conversations with people and the path of the country. And I think that kind of explains some of the things going on today. So that's the end of the speech. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Yeah.
The regime at UCLA, for instance, the 60s produced Angela Davis.
What's that?
I said the regime at UCLA in the 60s produced Angela Davis.
Yep.
Someone who distributed guns in court to shoot judges.
Yep, I know Angela Davis, yep.
She also went on to Claremont.
Yeah, and then while I do believe that there is a problem with the one-sided education that is provided at universities, I don't think the goal should ever be Republicans.
UCLA
Bruins, yeah. And then I was also the president of Turning Point USA, of the Intercollegiate Studies Institute on campus, and then I was the LA coordinator for the California College Republicans. Yeah.
And so are you a senior now?
I graduated. I'm working for the city, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great. Claudia?